think we have Pasha on the line here. Let me go ahead and let him get in here. So let's see. It's still Pasha. Are you there?
Hi, Fred. I'm here.
Hey,
I'm here.
Hey, how are you out there in the Oregon area today?
Good. It's a rainy day, so a normal day for Oregon.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say,
Portland, Oregon. Portland, Oregon.
Normal day out there. So anyway, so we're talking about six-side sealing, and I know we communicated before, earlier this afternoon on you've done some experiments with that. So I'm going to give you the mic and let you talk about your experiments when it comes to the six-side sealing issue. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. I have my 5 cents to share about it. Well, to make the story short, if our listeners are interested in learning about the six-sided sealing method or all-sided sealing method, they could just Google it. And there are numerous articles from different manufacturers who have that particular method as part of their installation, systems. So I read about that method, and actually there is a very, very, very detailed white paper or article in one of our industry documents. I will not mention the document because I have nothing against the document. It's an amazing document. But I think that method has some gray areas. Mm-hmm. And when explaining all the benefits, about the using that method, the authors or the manufacturers who promote that method, they don't really explain some things that actually happen inside showers or wet areas. So that method, I don't see any problems with that method if manufacturers' recommendations, directions are properly followed. I don't see any problems in dry areas. When you seal all sides, it definitely can help from some grout pigments or some other pigments seep into the stone. Some like translucent onyx natural stone can definitely benefit from that method in dry areas. But when it comes to wet areas, when stone gets exposed to the significant amount of water, all those articles don't really address it. They don't really explain some challenges associated with that particular, real life situation. And I decided to test 2 of my modules. So far, I tested 10 Carrara shower floor modules, trying to recreate the situations that we have, like in, real life situations that happen, during the when people use their showers done with Carrara marble. Some people, they kind of, they doubt that could be a, real testing because it wasn't done in a, laboratory. It was, I was testing my modules on my backyard, and they would, ask, so why we should believe that method, or that testing results, because it's kind of, it doesn't look like high science. But the thing is that my modules that I made, following every possible industry standard, and I exceeded many things, because normally you would install natural stone and then you would grout it, let's say 2 days after, like 3 days after, because I took my time and I exceeded all those curing periods. So I made sure, for example, when I sealed it, I waited more. Like I waited, the module was completely protected from the UV light, from the direct sunlight. I did my best, and then I waited, like, let's say 6 days, 7 days, making sure that everything is cured. Everything is looks bright white before it gets exposed to water. So all my modules, they looked absolutely great, absolutely, like white, like Carrara marble looks, before they started being exposed to water. And then, so I tested 2 modules. And what I want to say is that my modules went through all possible weather cycles, because they were outside. They were exposed to harsh weather conditions. They were exposed to, sunlight. They were also exposed to just, mild weather, and they were acting the same way regardless of weather. Sometimes they would dry out a little bit faster when it was hot or kind of, dry outside. But I was testing them from late fall until summer. And in Oregon, weather changes frequently. And regardless of weather conditions, they all acted the same way. They showed absolutely same results with any, weather condition outside.
Good.
So I did 2 modules with that method. First one, I just did it, I didn't really follow any manufacturer's recommendations. What I did is I took a good solvent-based penetrating sealer, and I dipped every single piece. So I installed my Carrara piece by piece. So every single piece was dipped into the sealer for about a minute or 2, I don't remember. And then I made sure that I carefully dried every single piece, making sure that it had enough air ventilation, so that it was not laying flat on the surface, etc. And then I installed it using 100% solids epoxy mortar. Okay. And the grout that I used was urethane type grout, meaning that it was not fully waterproof or almost waterproof like epoxy grout, so it would still absorb some water. And when it was set with epoxy mortar, full mortar coverage, no voids under the stone, and grouted with that particular grout, so when it was exposed to water, there was no water stains or what we call moisture discoloration, in random patterns. But what happened is the entire shower pen, became darker as opposed to its original color. And then it just became dark, like wet, like the look of the wet marble, Carrara marble. It was wet, and then it would remain wet for approximately 4 to 5 days without any lightening, and I stopped watering it. So that meant to me that the stone was holding water, and the sealer that I used, the penetrating sealer, would not allow it to breathe. Okay, so that was one method, and we could say that it was not the recommended sealer that the manufacturer recommended for that particular application. So my second module, I carefully followed to the T the recommendations from one of the manufacturers who recommends that particular method. I used the cementitious mortar that they recommend because their sealer was made so that it will not be a bond breaker for their mortars. So I used a premium cementitious mortar recommended by the manufacturer, very good mortar. I used their sealer. The sealer was a water-based penetrating sealer, and actually I tested that sealer with one of my mock-up boards, and actually that's a good sealer. It really repels water, so it's a good sealer. I carefully followed everything, so I dipped it for 2 minutes, again, every single piece, dried it carefully for a few days, minimum like 48 hours. I think it was much longer. And then I grouted it with the sanded grout. It's a really good stain-resistant sanded grout, again, recommended by the manufacturer. Okay? So, and then I waited maybe like 5 days just to let that mortar dry under the stone. So after approximately 7 days, the module looked very, very light, like stone that is not installed, like your normal sheet of Carrara marble. And then when I started exposing it to water, it was actually in the summer, and I was protecting the module from the kind of in the shade from the UV lights. So when I started exposing it to water 2 times a day, in the morning, in the night, approximately like 2 days later, the entire module became dark. Like no spots, no random looking blotchy patterns. Every single piece became dark, same way as the other module. And then it would remain dark same way for approximately 5, 6 to 7 days. And then it would gradually lighten up after maybe 6 or 7 days. That was a proof and the evidence to me that module was holding water. And the reason for that is because even if the first module, when the first module was installed with epoxy, full coverage, meaning that water would not really sit under the stone, it would either sit in the grout joints or inside the stone. Here, we have a problem that the cementitious mortar, even though it's, I would say it's water resistant to some degree, it would still absorb moisture and water, and that water, that moisture, a little amount of that moisture and water is enough to make Carrara, translucent Carrara marble, look darker. And so nothing, I mean, I stopped watering it, and then it would do that same thing over and over again. So you water it for 2-3 days, the entire model becomes dark, and then you stop watering it down, hosing it down, and then 6 days later, it would gradually like lighten up and slowly return to its original color.
Makes
so
sense.
That's a great six-sided sealing method is a great method. Probably is followed properly in dry areas. When it comes to wet areas, we have to do a research. So we cannot really, promote that method without, checking all those details. And I think nowadays problems is that many times advertising goes in front of research and testing, and many things are not really tested.
Yep, exactly. And I want to back up too. In the very beginning, you had mentioned some people criticizing your experiments, and I just want to tell you, whenever you do that, you're going to get criticism. There's going to be people out there that are going to criticize them. But you have to, pat yourself on the back, and I pat you on the back as well for doing that. I don't know any other person out there, other than a research facility, that would even attempt to do that at your own cost and your own time. So it's great.
Yeah.
Great.
And the last thing to say is that I'm not a manufacturer representative. I'm a time working tile contractor installer, and I practice what I say. So I'm not against any method. I just want to know the truth. I want to see what methods work and in what conditions, and I want to follow it to provide my customers with high quality end product. So that's my goal. I'm not against any manufacturer, any method. It's just we just have to know where and when to use methods and where they're not applicable.
Absolutely. And one other thing I want to ask you, and if you haven't done this yet, maybe something to do later on down the road. And on those modules where you did the six-sided sealing, did you happen to test a bond in it at all? Try to pull a tile up and see how easily they came up?
You know what? I think what I did, I definitely tested the one that I set with epoxy. So I bonded. Yeah. So I think, as far as I remember, I did test both for bonding. What I did, because I was using 2x2 individual pieces of Carrara marble. Yes. What I did is I bonded, a couple pieces together, the one with epoxy and the other one with that cementitious mortar. And the bond was incredible. It was a normal bond. There was no bond breaker there. So it was a very, very strong bond from piece to piece with cementitious mortar and, of course, with epoxy.
Right. And
so I did test that just for myself.
Great. That's good information. And that's actually one of the questions I want to ask the manufacturers when I get them on the line here, probably at another show, because I've contacted several of them, is that, what makes their – now, we're not talking epoxy. Epoxy has a different bonding. It's a chemical bond. But what makes their cementitious-based mortars bond when the sealers are repelling water? So it's obviously not a typical, Portland cement bond. It's it's some type of chemical bond. So that's a question I want to ask them. So, but until that time, I agree 100% with you. What areas are a concern. So I really appreciate the call, Pasha. I know you got to get back to work there, and I really appreciate you calling in. So, and I'll also mention, if anyone wants to know more about his experiments, he has a write-up. And do you remember what issue of Tile Letter it was in? Was it with a few months back?
Either July's issue or August. I think. So if you're listening to this podcast, just Google marble moisture discoloration, and you will immediately find my article in the tile letter or in the Slippery Rock Gazette. Marble moisture discoloration. It will be on the first page.
All right, perfect. Yes, and it's a great article, and also we've interviewed you, I think, 2 or 3 times on that issue on these podcasts. So those podcasts are still up. So if you guys want to